Hey everyone, happy Friday once again, and welcome to another episode of Elevate.Strategy Leadership Live. And this week I have actually started calling it Unplugged because what I found is over the weeks, it's been since March, I think every single Friday I've had really great guests, but it's really kind of turned into really great kind of personal conversations, and it's almost devoid of what they do for a living, where the awesome places that they work, but really more around their career journeys, which is great. And as you know, the Leadership Live series is really intended for you to hear about the career stories and journeys of various people who worked in companies and places that many people admire, right? And so hopefully that's been hitting the mark. I know I've gotten some pretty good feedback from some of you guys, just to kind of see the journey of other people kind of puts our career into perspective as well, that everyone has gone through sort of ups and downs, etc. So whether you are just straight out of university or whether you're a professional, kind of been in the workplace for 25, 30 years, there's always stuff to learn from other people's stories. And I'm sure there's stuff to learn from your story as well. So just a very quick update about Elevate. I am very excited to launch something called Elevate.Strategy Launchpad. And yesterday I posted about that. And essentially it is for people who have a lower household income than society kind of allows for it in a sense, or folks who are new to Canada, or people who have been unemployed for three plus months. And really what it is it's a resume assessment. And I've always wanted to do this, but I haven't been able to since I started coaching. But it's been great because I've been working with a lot of really great clients. And because of that, I'm in a better position to do that now. So I will send out another note later on. But if you are interested in having a quick resume assessment for me or folks that I know, send your resume to info@elevate.strategy.com. That's info@elevate.strategy.com. And I'll send it again once all the criteria are there. All right. So without further ado, I want to introduce today's guest. And I first met Sarah probably at a judging competition that we both did in marketing. We'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But when I met her, heard about her qualifications, heard about what she was doing. I think back then she was in a different role, but just amazing background. So I wanted to get her on board to kind of share a little bit about her journey and what she's doing today. But let me give you a brief kind of bio. So Sarah is head of agency development at Amazon Ads, and she is responsible for shaping and driving Amazon Ads strategic agency partnerships with the goal of transforming the depth, scale, and ambition of their partnerships with major media outlets and agencies in Canada. The agency team partners with holding companies and their agencies to drive education and adoption of Amazon's rapidly developing range of products and services across Amazon, IMDb, Twitch, Fire TV, and the Amazon DSP. Prior to Amazon, Sarah spent nearly 2 decades on agency side, and as SVP of Client Solutions at Dentsu, led the network's Canadian growth strategy. Very well qualified, as I said. Sarah has a passion for nurturing the next generation of talent. And in fact, again, where I met her was at a case competition for marketing, which was an amazing one that's Canadian-wide. And recently she co-hosted a week-long conference uniting female entrepreneurs and founders. She's most proud of her 3 bold and brave daughters. And as a family, they like to travel and spend time being active outdoors with her 2 puppies. And so without further ado, Sarah, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Very excited to be here. I have to say it's a bit out of my comfort zone, but the theme of today, as you'll see, is getting out of your comfort zone. So thanks for the Simeon.
I wouldn't be able to tell that it's out of your comfort zone, but to be honest, I mean, I've always conducted these interviews as if we were over a coffee or something like that, and people were listening in. So if you're listening in today, I know Facebook, YouTube folks are tracked and LinkedIn aren't, which is kind of frustrating because I really don't want to know who you are. But if you have a comment, please feel free to drop in below. We'll find out a little bit more about what Sarah does today. And if you are interested in what she does, or if you're interested in something about her journey, feel free to drop in a note. We'd love to get to know who you are. But Sarah, I guess first of all, just to kick off, I mean, congratulations on the new role. I
Thank you.
think when we first met, you were in a different role. So
Mhm.
really amazing company, Amazon Ads, obviously. So I guess for those of you who don't know, and I'm actually kind of curious to know, is what do you do there right now in Amazon Ads?
Sure. Yes, I made the move about 3 and a bit months ago. And as you said off the top, it's leading the agency team, but also the emerging product sales teams in Canada. And it's going out and building relationships with the large holdcos in the market and sometimes smaller ones too, to start to educate them about what Amazon is all about, build partnerships, build training, help upskill their teams to tackle customer challenges and things they're running across,
Hmm.
and really build the partnership and the foundation of how Amazon is working with each of these agencies in their whole coast.
Gotcha. And how many people are in Amazon in Canada in total? Do you know that?
Oh gosh, I do not have that number at all.
Yeah,
I think the theme again is rapidly growing. I
yeah,
One of the cool
yeah.
things they have at Amazon is you're able to see where you sit amongst those who've been hired before you and those who've been hired after. And I can say I joined 3 months ago, and certainly there's a 3-digit number behind me of those who've come in after me because it's
Right.
constantly growing.
Yeah, well, that's great. I mean, if any company is, we spoke before the interview, if any company is acquiring land or amassing, capability, it's definitely Amazon. So about your role itself, what are some of the most challenging aspects of what you face day to day?
I think it's again, it's so customer centric in the way that we're focused that every challenge or opportunity with our opcos is different based on what they're seeing with their customers as well. It's a very volatile environment right now. And so I think you can have best laid plans, but being able to adapt and sort of curve the way things need to go right now is really what we're trying to do as an organization and as a team. So no two conversations are the same. I just spoke to someone earlier and I said that my week is never boring because while
Yeah,
it's action packed, it's a ton of different activities, ton of different conversations. I'm going, up and down and all over the place, and it really keeps me on my toes. So it's fun.
gotcha. And is this a role that was sort of a natural continuity of your previous role, or is it sort of a shift in scope and you're doing things that are different now?
It's a continuation. No, it was a very strategic, conscious choice on my part to move into tech and move into this part of the business. I wouldn't say I have a tech background, but I have a deep agency background, and taking that agency knowledge and parlaying that into what I'm doing today has been a
Mhm.
real asset and something that I've been able to bring to the table. I think that my team's really seeing some positive things in.
Gotcha. And in the midst of COVID, has that impacted at all about the work that you do, or kind of have you had to be more creative in partnerships and like what? Tell us a little bit about kind of what life has been like for the past. I guess you've been there for a couple of months, but in general, what has it been like?
Yeah. Well, I would say that it's the same now as it was when I was at Dentsu. So I can speak just in generalities, and that
Mhm.
dealing almost exclusively through a computer screen changes the dynamic of your conversations and of your relationships. And you really have to be
Right.
very intentional with reaching out to people. I call them, the office flybys, when you just sort of go by someone's desk and quickly ask a question. That's gone.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
same with our customers and the people we work with and advertisers. You can't just pop by and have a quick conversation. Everything has to be really scheduled. And I think it changes how you
Mhm.
talk to people and how you schedule things. You're very business driven in those conversations. There's not the
Right.
same amount of pleasantries because you have to get to the point. Everyone's on calls back to back.
Right.
So that's been an interesting challenge. I think the other thing when I was at Dentsu is there was a lot of new business and collaboration happening. And I think we've been really forced to learn how to collaborate in a virtual environment in a new and
Yeah.
different way that I think again is not natural, and how you normally whiteboard something and you all get together, but it's forced teams into thinking differently about how they connect and
Mhm.
embracing new tools and technology that are out there to help enable it, which I don't think we would have done otherwise.
Right. Gotcha. So this series is about career journeys, and so I'd love to kind of delve into that a little bit about, you can kind of work backwards or forwards, it's up to you, but really just trying to understand the path that you took to get to where you are today. And so is this something that you always were interested in, and just, it was great that you could find the right structures, or, tell it as it is, however you want to share about your journey. That'd be great.
It was in prepping for this conversation, it was probably one of the first times that I actually went back and thought about my journey. I think I've just been going a million miles an hour since the start of my career journey, that I'd never really stopped to acknowledge what that path was. So it was a great exercise to start to go through and do that. If I go way back, I was sure I was going to be a doctor. I was going, wanted to be in sports medicine.
Okay.
I was involved in competitive sport all through, high school and into my early adulthood, predominantly in basketball, but I played soccer and I was a runner as well. And so I'd been injured a time or two playing on all those concrete courts back in my youth. But that's what I wanted to do. I was going to take my science passion, my sports passion, and I was going to become a sports medicine doctor. And so I applied to a lot of different universities for that. And I ultimately went to Western.
Right.
And I started in health sciences, and I had a minor in French. So I also grew up in French immersion school. So I've spoken 2 languages my whole life as well. Started at Western, but some of my electives were actually in journalism. They were in media. They were in sociology. They were in psychology. And I was hooked. Like I got so interested in some of those courses. And in fact, I think in first or second year, there was a course about music and culture. And it was a 3rd-year course. And I was, as I said, in first or second year, it was Friday mornings at 8:30. And I never missed that course. And I think it was because it was so interesting. And yet, if you think about a Western University student prioritizing an 8:30 Friday AM course, I feel like it's not common, but it was so interesting, and really had me hooked that I quickly pivoted to where I wanted to focus my time. So I after leaving Western, I decided I wasn't quite ready to adult. I didn't want to get into the work world quite yet. So I spent a lot of time traveling. I ended up that summer before traveling actually working almost 20 hours a day to save up to go. I was at a golf course during the day in the pro shop, and I worked at a restaurant at night, and I just worked and saved up all my money and went traveling with my boyfriend, who's now my husband of almost 17 years. Traveled together. And during that trip, I decided that I would like to apply to Sheridan's advertising program. So I ended up doing the interview and the process for getting into that program from the basement of a hotel in Essaouira, Morocco. It was a bit of a whim.
Morocco?
Yeah, I went. So I was in this hotel. I was traveling, and there was a deadline to apply. And I found a phone line and some internet in the basement of this old hotel. And I did my full application and interview to get into the program. And so I came back and I did that for a couple of years. And again, wasn't quite ready to adult. So worked for my mother-in-law for a while. She had a small business in Oakville. And I don't know if any of your listeners have ever heard of it. It was quite a big deal in Oakville. It was a knitting shop. So anyone who's a knitter would know of the wool bin. But I worked there for quite a while, and I learned to knit, and I ran classes, and actually I set up her first e-com site. So we were selling knitting and yarn kits online. Now this was 2 decades ago, back before e-com was a thing. And I started by selling yarn, and actually it was a pretty good business. And I set that up for her. Then ultimately decided that it was time to go and do my own thing and actually start to grow up and get out in the world. So one of the tips I give to everyone I speak to now is I went out and I interviewed a lot of different people and different companies to figure out what I wanted to do. So I talked to journalists. I talked to creative agency leads. I talked to big companies, small companies, just to figure out what they actually do. Because I'm not sure our education system really prepares you for the really of what those jobs are. So spent a lot of time doing what I now call my listening tours. And it was during that tour that I met somebody named Annette Waring, who at the time was the president of Genesis Media. It was later acquired and taken into the Dentsu family.
Right.
But I met her, and through the course of that conversation was so inspired by who she was as a leader and who she was as a person that I left that interview. I remember I got down to the sidewalk outside of the building. I called my husband and I said, I think I love this woman. Got home
Okay.
and I had a job offer on my phone at that time. And,
Wow. Okay.
that experience was formative in that it has really shown me that I'm drawn to people, I'm
Mm,
drawn to leaders, and I'm drawn to culture more than I was to a role. And it was finding that person who really got me excited and inspired. And she
right.
stayed with me through my career. I've stayed close to her. Um,
Mm, mm,
and, that was really an important meeting for me and has
okay.
really set me off on my path. So I stayed, close to her, and I stayed with Dentsu off and on for almost 2 decades. I was at Publicis for some time as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, and during that time, I really grew from the youngest person in the room to not the youngest person in the room, but running some of the larger pieces of business, running integrated client business across Procter and Gamble, Coca-Cola, other big pieces of business,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
then moved into a growth role. And I sat at the network level within Dentsu and worked across clients and advertisers who worked with Dentsu across multiple pieces of business. So maybe they're creative agencies, they're media agencies, and really trying to integrate into a consolidated customer offering. Like, how could we do better for that advertiser by working together and really integrating our services? So I did that for a few years. And
Right.
then I think the pandemic was a moment of truth for me too. And it was sort of, is this what you want to do for the next little bit? And how do you see
Right.
yourself growing? And so I took a bit of a bold move and I leaped to Amazon this past June and have never looked back.
Right. Hey, I wanted to go back to something you said earlier on,
Mm.
and about the the course on music and culture that you were
Yeah.
really into. Um, was it difficult for you to transition from a mindset of wanting to be in healthcare to something like, something that this course had sort of
Hmm.
put into your mind and into your heart, right? Um, was that an easy transition and kind of because it really made sense, or did you have to kind of struggle with letting go of certain things that you'd always wanted to do? Because you always wanted to do sports medicine, right? It sounds like you're really
Yeah.
passionate about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. It was an interesting moment for me because I think I'd always defined myself as an athlete, and I defined myself as being a certain way.
Hmm.
I had not thought about advertising or media or any of that before. And so in itself, it wasn't a hard move. I was inspired. I enjoyed it. I was a sponge in all of those classes. But there was a part of me that thought that maybe I was changing my identity a bit because I was really latched on to sports and athletics.
Right.
But I think my heart was one way. My body might have been one way. My heart was the other. I was really passionate about what you could learn from people and culture and
Right.
advertising and everything that's out in the world, and how to then speak to people differently as a result of it. And that got me
Mhm.
really excited.
So, has any of your healthcare background come in handy at all?
Well, I was a soccer coach briefly.
Okay.
So I coached some soccer for some of my daughters. Um, but not
Yeah.
not so much. I've sort of let that go. Now actually as I age and I start to get pains in my knees, I can say, well, here are probably the exercises that I should start to use instead. So I do pull out some of that education, but that's about it.
No, no, no. I mean, there's no, yeah. If I've got white hairs here, and
Yeah.
some of my watchers, my listeners have told me but whatever, right?
Yeah.
It's part of the journey. Um, so then you you kind of switched lanes a little bit, right? So some of my clients have a hard time doing that,
Mhm.
and but in my mind, in my experience speaking with many people, a lot of my clients and myself, it's never too late to switch lanes.
Mhm.
That's why I asked the struggle around sort of the
Mhm.
mentality of, are you sort of giving up part of who you are to do something different? Um,
Yeah.
but it sounds like something in your life that was important was curiosity. Is that something that's what was as important to you? It was.
I think that's a fair assessment. And it's interesting that leap and that shift, I think, is actually something that's even more current in the shift from agency to Amazon. I mean, that, yes, it's a natural progression, but it was a real curve. And I think I have to psych myself up a bit sometimes to make these bold moves and make these big changes. And that's something that I'm personally working on in my life, to be brave and to take chances and to do things a bit differently and follow your heart. I think I make a lot of choices and a lot of decisions through my gut. Yes, I'm data driven, but I make a lot through, and as I said, even meeting Annette, like, that was a choice based on gut and culture and person and leader, and less about the minutia of that particular role that I was getting into. And I think that shift from medicine to advertising, from agency to Amazon, it's all part of that same storyline. But I don't do it that frequently. And I every once in a while I'll do these big shifts. And I think, again, if I go back to that boss that hired me, is that she has become a mentor. And in many times when I've made some of these shifts, not in school, but in my career, she's been a catalyst for a lot of them. That mentor has been someone who I've confided in, who I've talked to, who I've shared my thoughts about. And she's really inspired me to make some changes and be a bit brave and bold. And sometimes she put me in positions that I was not comfortable in, not in a bad way, but just ones that I didn't feel like I was naturally inclined to do. And they've been some of the best nudges or pushes in my career. And so it is hard to make change. But sometimes if you feel it, and you know that it's for the best future, you make that call.
Yeah, and the theme of mentors has come up quite a bit in these conversations, where we can't do things alone, right? I know from my own career that I've had probably about 5 to 7 sort of people in my life who have really made a difference, taken a chance on me. In some cases, maybe putting their own skin in the game, right? But really for no other reason but just to kind of be a kind person, to kind of help people along the way. Maybe they've been through some situations as well. It kind of makes you want to be a mentor as well. One of the things that you talked about in your bio is that you take a lot of pride in wanting to develop the new talent. So that's really awesome. So what would you say, and I'm curious about or any listeners, about what are the 2 or 3, or maybe not that many, but character traits or things that are important as far as personality or character, or that are important for leadership today. So whether you are a leader right now or whether you're a leader looking for a new role, right? What do you have to demonstrate to be a good leader in this day and age?
So yeah, it's a great question too. I think maybe what I thought and what is true has evolved over time. I really believed, I was very competitive. I'm still quite competitive. I do not let my children win at anything, but very competitive, very ambitious. And that took me far in life. And I really thought that that's what a leader was, to be bold and loud and brave and competitive and ambitious. But in the background, that's always been something that has resulted in me self-selecting out of things that I'm not good at. Right. If there's a notion that I might fail or that I might not show up in a good way, I stay safe and I don't throw my hat into the ring. And so that's something I've actively been working on. But I think it's okay to be a bit vulnerable too. And the expectation is not always that you show up and be perfect at everything. And I think that vulnerability, or that, being an authentic leader and one that's not an image of what a leader is, but truly someone who is authentic and real, is a key characteristic of people that I like to be around, and who the leader that I aspire to be as well. I bring my whole self to my work, and I think I'm pretty open and transparent, and it's something that I value in others and that I try to do as well.
So why do you? Sorry, go ahead. Good.
I was going to say, the other thing about a leader is within that vulnerability, being able to ask for help, and not feeling like you have to be perfect at everything. And I think the second part of that is not only asking for help, but then not feeling guilty about asking for that help. Knowing that we can't all know everything. And I see that in my role at Dentsu, and I see it at Amazon. I need to be a bit of a generalist. I can't be deep on everything. And you have to know the people that you can pull in around you to help to be those specialists. And
Right.
observing that and knowing that that's okay is also the sign of a good leader.
Gotcha. I was going to go back to transparency, and I thought,
Yeah.
why do you think it's so important for teams to see that their leader is being transparent?
I think it's a level of realism that you can bring to the table. I think in business, we try to paint a really positive or paint a certain picture, whether it be positive or negative sometimes as well. And it's not really the full story. And if I go back to what inspired me about getting into this industry, it was the full story. It was understanding people's emotions and their thoughts behind things and why they do things. And I don't think we can truly do that in this industry if we ourselves are not open and transparent. The other piece of advice that I heard from someone, and this is, I believe this to be fundamentally true, is people expect their leader or people want predictability out of their leader, and whether that be to be honest or truthful, but not to be sort of one day one way and one day another way. Because I think you lose people and you lose their confidence in coming to you if they don't know what they're going to get on the other end. And so being open and transparent and honest and being, for lack of a better term, a bit predictable in that, I think opens up communication with your team and is the right way to lead.
Right. And I think, especially in this day and age of change, to be in the trenches with your team I mean, change encroaches upon you, right? None of us are kind of, third-party observers looking in onto change. We're constantly being affected by change, right? So I think being in the trenches with your teams are very, very important, critical to that. And what I've found is in the area of career coaching is the questions about teams have now evolved from, tell me about a time when you had to work with someone who was difficult, right? And what did you do about that too? What do you aspire to be as far as the kind of leader, right? Give me some adjectives that would describe your leadership quality, right? I think the assumption is that you're going to get into some sort of, clashes with people, but the idea is, what kind of a leader do you want to become, right? So that's great. So let me ask you, in the career journey that you've talked about here to where you are today, I like to ask about struggles. So things that kind of, maybe that's a strong word, but can you share with us maybe a couple of either decision points where you may have had a decision that wasn't as good, or something that you had to kind of overcome, be it your shyness or be it like you're out of your comfort zone, whatever it is. So struggles that you've had going through it, maybe that you were surprised about that you had, and what have you done to overcome that, or what are you continuing to do to try to overcome those?
I feel like it's the common response, but it's real. Imposter syndrome and feeling like you don't necessarily belong somewhere has constantly been a struggle for me. When I first started my career, again, I was taken under the wing of this president at the time. It was a small company, so I was invited to the table in some pretty important and large meetings for which I was the youngest person in the room. They belonged there. But I also felt a little bit of pride in that because I was the youngest person there and I was trusted to be a part of that meeting or that gathering. As I grew in my career, I was no longer the youngest person in the room, and now I needed to be the one that sort of could conduct the room and make sure that I was bringing in the right people and that we were leading the conversation in the way it needed to go. And then I was a bit of a imposter in that too, thinking, am I the leader now? Like, am I the one that's trusted to be the most senior one in the room? And so it was pivoting from what I identified as being a bit of a coup, being this youngest person, into now being, oh wait, no, you are the now person leading this meeting, and you need to step up to the table and make sure that your team feels comfortable and confident with you there. So it's been a struggle. I coach myself. I've got a little voice in the back of my mind that I will coach myself before calls, before meetings, to, as hokey as it sounds, to just sort of make sure that I'm in my own mind clear, like why I'm there and that I'm supposed to be there and I'm invited into that room and I'm supposed to be there. but it's constantly a struggle. Even if you take, not meetings, but even negotiating promotions or negotiating salaries, I have to coach myself. And for a while, I'll be quite honest, I had to say to myself in my mind, what would a man do in your situation? And I know that's very, I had to put that hat on and say, no guy in the agency that you work with that would be overthinking asking for this promotion. Like, why are you? And sort of being that voice in my mind and convincing myself that I had a right to the conversation. And then I would always lead with data. Here's why I deserve it. It wasn't an emotional ask. It was a data-led ask. And those were some of the ways that I tackled it. But I don't know if it's ever going to go away, Simeon. It's always something that's in the back of your head a little bit, and it's just how you deal with it that changes.
That's a lot to unpack. That's probably the most comprehensive and deepest response that I've heard. Quite genuinely so, on a number of levels. So on the imposter syndrome, and the thought that you had around asking yourself, what would a guy do? There's so much to unpack there. First of all, there was a comment that I had a couple of weeks ago from a guest of mine who said the same thing, where before they walked into a room for a meeting, she had to kind of identify what was her role in there, what was her role going to be. And so she had to she wanted to be the master of her own destiny, in a sense, which is great. I think that's a great idea to do, is to, whenever you're walking into a situation where you're uncertain about the outcome, is no matter what, there's an anchor that says in your point to say, my role is going to be this. And it might evolve during the meeting, but after a while, you just train yourself to do that, right? That little voice in your head, like you said. The imposter syndrome thing, where do you think you got that from? I mean, you're a sports person, and most sports people that I know are, if they're good at their craft, they own the field, right? So where do you think you got that from?
It probably goes back again to that fear of failure and not wanting to disappoint. And as I mentioned, self-selecting out of things where I thought I wasn't going to do well. And so I never really forced myself through some of those challenging moments. But I'm not sure. I always, growing up, I think I was good in school. I played a lot of sports. And so I held myself to this standard of, for lack of a better term, of perfection. And so the minute I was no longer fully in control, and I wasn't necessarily at the point of being a master of my own destiny, it got a bit scary. And so I think, your person who you're speaking about there from your previous interview is right. Like, coaching yourself ahead of time is to say, no, like, you should be here. This is what your role is in this room. You've got a seat at the table. Make use of it. Is a really key thing to get over that hurdle.
Do you remember an incident or a time where imposter syndrome kind of got to you and sort of affected the way that the outcome was, as far as you presented, and it wasn't as good as it was? And, to tell us about, kind of when it didn't work out, when imposter syndrome kind of came in. It's like, maybe there was an impact, maybe there wasn't the outcome, but to you it was real.
Sure. And it happens all the time. It still absolutely happens all the time. And it's just how you coach yourself. But one of the things that I got into, and it's quite recent in the pandemic, is being home and doing presentations. You can read your screen. And so for a long time, when I was doing new business or when I was doing really presentations where I did not want to mess up, I would script myself. And you've been on the receiving end of someone who's scripted something. It doesn't look real. I don't know if I was fooling anyone, but I fell into a bit of a crutch where I was scripting myself again because I didn't feel like I was capable of delivering the message that I wanted to deliver without that crutch.
Gotcha.
I probably would have been much better without the script, to be honest. But it's a nuance of something that I would not be able to do if I were in the office. If you were presenting live, you couldn't read from a paper. But when you're presenting behind a computer screen, you can. And it's a bad habit that I started, and I've thrown it away now. But it was something that I did quite recently.
Gotcha. Well, I think that's something that, when you first present in person, the memorization of, okay, especially if you're presenting to slides, right? Is
Right.
to say, okay, what's the main point of this slide that I need to make
Yeah.
sure that I get across? And you know, I remember the first couple of years when I was in consulting is, you know, they always say that, you know, establish the credibility of yourself and then establish credibility of every slide, right? What is the
Mhm.
purpose of that slide to be in there? But I would fumble all around and I completely forget what the point is, even though I could refer to the data.
Yeah.
And it just takes time and experience to be
Absolutely.
comfortable with that. Actually, even in this series of interviews, if you look back at any of the series that I did in March, I spoke so quickly, I didn't really know what I was doing. And I just wanted to do it. I just wanted to talk to people and kind of understand them. And over time, people gave me feedback and to, like, you know, negative feedback, positive feedback, whatever it is. Quite frankly, I really don't care. And I think that part of that aspect of not caring about what people think,
Hmm.
kind
Hmm.
of what you were saying about overcoming imposter syndrome, right? Is that what is failure, right? In your mind, what is the metric of failure? Now, sometimes if you're in there to present a sales pitch, I mean, doing it well is a
Right.
standard mark of
Important.
success, right?
Yeah.
But as a personal development thing is, you know, you want to be up there because you want to be up there, right? And then the content comes into play. So that's awesome. Um, I have to touch on the topic of why would your mind gravitate towards what would a man do, right?
Yeah.
Was that an easier way for you to calm yourself down and say, hey, you know, I shouldn't be so concerned about this. Let's go in there and
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. What I've now learned later in my career is many of those men that I was comparing myself to in my mind in order to boost myself up for that conversation are equally as full as of imposter syndrome as I am. So
right,
the
right,
ironic thing is maybe more so than even me.
right, right.
But it was a way for me to reconcile. I mean, I've had 3 children during my career as well. I've been out of the workforce off and on. Um, and in some ways, I felt a bit guilty for that, and maybe not, for lack of a better word, paying my dues, but I knew
Mhm,
that I was delivering results. I knew that I was worthy of some of these things that I was asking for. And, barring a phenomenal boss that's constantly looking out for you, like no one really hands you anything. Like you do need to go after what you want. You need to
mhm,
state what you want. But that wasn't natural for me. And
mhm,
again, there was this level of guilt that maybe I didn't actually deserve it. So it was in those times when I knew there was a key moment, a negotiation period that had come up, that I should be going in and having this conversation, or maybe that promo or raise wouldn't happen for another year, that I did have to say, what would a man in this situation do? And it wasn't men in general. It was some of the men that I was working with and that I
mhm.
knew or I perceived to be confident. I
Right,
would more so
right,
model myself to them because they were in a similar role to me. And I thought, how disappointed would I be if that person went in and was able to negotiate this on behalf of themselves, and I didn't just because I was too scared.
right. Gotcha. Yeah, and the idea that we're alone in struggling through anything is like the biggest myth to debunk, right?
Yes.
That's the whole purpose of the series is that for folks that I've been working with, many of whom very senior people have been working for many, many years, lots of titles, but you know, imposter syndrome keeps coming in various forms. Um, Even to the point where a lot of very senior people don't even know how to interview because they don't
Mm.
really know how to express their confidence, right? In the sense of, and so it continues to be the case as well. Um, all right, so that's very interesting, very raw, given the day that the
I'm
day and age.
authentic. I'm honest, right? I told you this. This is my style.
And you know what? It's one thing to be honest. It's another thing to be honest and results oriented, right? And I think you're both, right? So honesty is only going to get you so far, but at the end of the day, your team is there to work together for you to deliver results, right? And so that's an unspoken truth that needs to happen.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, what I've seen a lot of is folks who are actually very honest or very confident, but have lost track of the fact that either the metrics have shifted from them and they haven't performed as well as they used to, or they're actually not focusing on their craft a lot,
Mhm.
and so they're relying too much on, perhaps they've been working for a company for many, many years, and so they've kind of coasted a little bit, right? So now they're kind of reinvigorating. It's not that they're not hardworking, but they're
Yeah.
reinvigorating what their skills are, retooling, etc. Um, so during those difficult times that you, by the way, congratulations on being a mom. I have three kids as well, and
Yeah. It's fun,
my
isn't it?
it is fun, yeah. And my wife is tremendously amazing at just kind of, she's so much. I just recently realized that my kids never ask me if they can have snacks. They
Yeah.
only ask my wife.
She's snack
It's like,
lady.
or to sign their agenda. That's the latest
Yeah.
thing. It's like, I have an agenda. So I was like, I'm sitting right here, right? You don't,
Yeah. Yeah.
like, mom's in the kitchen. But anyway, the theme for me, for a lot of the female guests that I've had, is they've all said the same thing, is that, having children has made them stronger. Um, and perhaps arguably it's sort of set them back a little bit in their career.
Mhm.
But because there was a common element of never wanting to let go of their vision. They wanted to work. They wanted to
Mhm.
go back into the workplace and make a difference, right? And
Mhm.
so coordinating with, their family members, whatever it is, really meant a lot. Drawing the boundaries, right? And as you have three young girls,
Mhm.
it's as drawing boundaries is extremely important.
Mhm.
So all right, so struggles. What's brought you through some of those difficult times? What are some of the things that you've done, or what are the people that in your life, like what's
Mhm.
kind of carried you through during those difficult lives?
Yeah. So your point about your wife, signing in snacks. I have a husband too who is extremely, successful and busy himself, but same thing, like he's very engaged and involved with our kids. And it had to be that way. There were times that I was traveling or he was traveling, and we have to, share the burden a little
Yeah,
bit in terms
sure.
of what that is. He's always encouraged me to go after roles and opportunities that I'm really keen for. And I think, again, I wouldn't have made the leap from what was a successful multi-decade agency career into Amazon if I didn't have that support.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and also my family. I've relied a lot on my parents. I will
Yeah.
never not be their daughter. I need, having them close and being a point of guidance and having their pride and support has been really, really important as well. My parents were both teachers. They were, my mom changed roles a little bit. She started as a nurse, but they were in the education sector for almost their entire careers. In fact, my dad sort of, left high school, went to university, started as a teacher, and then retired from being a teacher. So the idea that I would change roles or that I would work these crazy hours or I would do any of that was just not something that was in my childhood, and the way that they necessarily understand. But at the end of the day, they're really supportive of
Hmm.
what I'm doing and of pushing through. And I think too, the other thing, and the reason I make some of these changes and the reason why I was conscious about technology and the change that I just made, I think you hit on it in your last point about retooling and just, challenging yourself. It was a bit of that. I'm in my 40s. I've got three young girls. I want them to see what is possible in their
Hmm.
career, and I want to have a long growing career. And so it was a really conscious choice for me to make this shift. But again, I couldn't have done it without the right support system. For me, it's my family, but for other people, it might be friends, other colleagues. Just having that net is really
Hmm.
critical to overcoming some of these challenges.
Hmm. Yeah, gotcha. My wife is actually a high school teacher as well, and it's funny your comment about working the long hours. It's not something that I don't know. I think probably your
Differently,
wife
yes.
is something. Yeah,
Fair enough.
I think on
A
a
lot of marking.
um,
Yeah.
per hourly basis, they work more hours. My wife
Yes.
works a lot of hours, as you know,
Yeah.
right? The
Yeah.
preparation and the stereotype of
Yeah.
teachers having the summers off. I mean, that really bugged the heck out of my wife. But um, that's great. No, but I think that's instilled in you the sense of responsibility, and also sort of teaching the whole wanting to teach and kind of bring along the next generation of people is
Mhm.
very much in someone who's grown up in an environment of education as well. So
Yeah.
okay, so last serious question I would have for you is, um, uh, so a lot of my clients often they ask me in this day and age of automation and all the changes and stuff like that, you know, what is it that companies are looking for as far as not just leadership, but um, you know, wanting to know where they're going to be placed in 5 years, right? Because you never get hired for that job itself, right? You're always thinking about, okay, where could this person go next, right? How should they be thinking about as far as career planning, and is there any sort of set framework that you think about when you think about kind of where you want to get to? Do you have any thoughts about that?
I think about it quite a bit. I don't know how to answer that, in that I think, the long-term ambition, it's always great to have a long-term ambition, but it's really hard to pinpoint what that's going to look like or be. I think if I look back 5 years from any role that I've ever had, generally 5 years prior to that, my role didn't exist.
Okay.
So, this role at Amazon, there was no head of agency. I mean, maybe, but the
There's
role
a
as
precursor to that, yeah.
Moving into some of the digital and programmatic space and thinking about the way digital was years ago, it didn't exist. So the guidance that I have is just try to embrace things with an open mind and know that you are building your repertoire and you're building your skills and capabilities. I think the mistake people can make is getting too comfortable in doing the same thing. And doing the same thing over and over and over and over again, because the job should and will evolve. And so just being open-minded to some of those changes. And again, my mentor sometimes steered me into things that felt a little bit uncomfortable at the time, or didn't feel like they were what I was used to or where I thought my career was going to go. It was in those moments that I grew the most, and that I took on new opportunities and was exposed to new things. And so it's this concept of always wanting to learn and always be open to change, that I think is something that is needed today. Because the roles will change and new roles will open up, and maybe a role you'll have down the line is not something that even is in reality today.
Yeah. A lot of the work that that I do is creating your own job, right? Creating your own role, writing your own job description. And I think oftentimes a lot of companies don't really know what they want, and in any case, right? So they have a perception of what should be on a job description, but it might be partly cut and paste, and it might be partly you just don't really know. So going in there with a point of view to say, here are the issues in your particular market, here's how I can help solve them, is so critical to that, right? So that's great.
And open ears. And as I said about, and open ears, like the listening tour that I said, going in not only with your point of view, but then going in to understand what the role's really about and what they're really looking for, and hearing the message behind the message. Because you're right, a lot of the job descriptions are very cut and paste. They say it's like university course descriptions. You think you're signing up for one thing and you get into it and you're like, is that what the description was about? And it's similar with a role. So I think you as much as you can go out and meet people and ask for help. I mean, all the time I put other people in, through me, put them in contact with someone in the industry to just go have a coffee with. I think it's important to do that.
Right. I never thought about the listening ears prior. I should add that to my repertoire. It's true. I mean, you if you don't have listening ears, you'll get listening ears, because people will let you know what they think about your ideas, right? So, but part of transparency is really just kind of being honest that some things you don't know about, you want to hear their opinion, their advice, right? So, okay, well, we're getting to the top of the hour. It's been really great chatting with you and getting to know your career journey.
Thanks. It's been fun.
I have just a couple of rapid fire questions that I'd love to ask.
Okay, shoot.
Okay? So I think this will be obvious, but what's your alter ego profession? If you weren't doing what you were doing, what would you be? I think I know what it is.
Yeah, probably in medicine. But I also used to joke that early in my career, my business card should have said clairvoyant firefighter, because I have to think ahead and know the future, but I need to also go in and put out fires. So clairvoyant firefighter is my answer.
Wow. Sorry, this is when you were younger or when you were working?
No, like when I first started my career, and I realized that I had to really think ahead and go in and sort of put out fires as well. But either that or definitely sports medicine, or maybe the professional stay-at-home coffee drinker would be another one. I would love that.
Okay, you're a coffee snob.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you have a brand that you could recommend?
Not necessarily. I sign up for a lot of the different home delivery ones where you can try from different parts of the world and get different bags each month. So I try to keep it interesting.
I never thought about that. That's great. I sometimes stick with instant. Anyway, so what is one word that you love? One word.
Family.
Okay. And what is one word that you hate?
No.
Why?
I don't mind the word no, but I don't like the word no without because or here's why. I think there needs to be more context. So I hate, I don't like being stopped with a no. I like to understand the why behind the no.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's truly the mark of someone who listens, right? And try to, okay, what is your motto? Do you have a motto in life that you follow? Like a phrase that keeps coming through your mind as you're going through, maybe it's like no imposter syndrome, no imposter syndrome.
It is. It's be brave. Just be brave. And that bravery shows up in different ways. It doesn't mean to be bold and loud spoken necessarily, but just choose those moments to have a voice and be brave.
Gotcha. No, that's great. And last thing is COVID habit or hobby that you've developed.
A lot more wine, but a lot more Pilates to counteract the wine.
Right. So wine more or coffee more?
Wine more, and then Pilates more, but still coffee. I drink coffee later into the morning now than I used to.
Gotcha. All right, cool. Okay. There's some noise in the background here, so I'll just wrap it up. But thank you so much, Sarah. I really appreciate your time. Don't go anywhere. I'm going to put you on backstage, and I'll just wrap up here and we'll chat. Thanks. All right. Take care. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
All right. So I don't even know where to begin. Lots and lots of content that was there. I might flag this particular interview with more substance than I normally do with timeline, time checks. But I think take homes, transparency, the leadership aspect of having an open ear, being vulnerable and kind of teachable at all times. And I know that it's tremendously difficult to be teachable during this period of time. Fortunately, not a lot of the workforce seems to have been affected to the same degree by COVID, but I know certainly a lot of my clients out there who are working with me that it can be a difficult time, right? So all of these qualities and attributes and characteristics really, in some sense, are timeless, right? But in many cases, it's how do you now express that as far as companies want to know what kind of leader that you want to be, and they want you to help them to figure out what the leadership needs to be in the future. So in any case, thank you so much for joining me again today. And next week I'll have another guest for you. But today was just wonderful with Sarah. All right, take care. Have a good weekend. Talk to you soon.